All right, everyone. Bolton is signaling that the U.S. is going to do more to try to delegitimize the socialists and commies that run several Latin American states, namely Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua. Now, it won't be hard because they're all falling apart. Cuba, a little bit less so because it's like it was so isolated for so long. It's difficult. But Venezuela right now is non-functional. Nicaragua's having extreme problems. And it's partially the result of highly centralized leftist regimes that don't know how to manage an economy. I actually support this. Now, I say this in a non-interventionist sense. It is appropriate and even good, under the auspices of the Monroe Doctrine as well, which I happen to agree with. It is appropriate for us, as the power of this hemisphere, to try to kick shitty economic systems out so that our neighbors can be wealthy. It would not be acceptable if we invaded. Using any form of force or direct coercion, like just randomly sanctioning a state, it should be a last resort, and war should not even be on the table in most cases. Invasion, occupation, all that bullshit. But trying to diplomatically isolate other nations, yeah. Trying to get other nations to put more pressure on them, to try to become, functional. The problem is, the alternative is to give free money to these states. The alternative, or the other alternative, is to allow the Russians and the Chinese to basically violate the concept of the Monroe Doctrine by propping up states that are non-functional simply because they happen to be vaguely, and I don't use this in the Bush sense, anti-American. I don't really care if a regime happens to be hostile to U.S. interests if it's outside of this hemisphere, number one. And number two, it really depends on what form that takes. The problem with Venezuela really is refugee-related. It's beginning to bleed over and become Brazil's and Colombia's problem, too. There are millions of Venezuelans out of the country. Now, again, you've got a huge amount of oil there, and they should be among the wealthiest countries in the world, but because of socialism and bad central planning, they never quite made it. We could help them, but I mean, Maduro has to go first, and Guaido's hardly better. He's just a socialist that says, okay, maybe I'll shoot less people. Should get rid of socialism entirely. Socialism's a cancer. Communism's a cancer. It's the most butcherous, insane ideology ever. When you have a lot of centrality in a system, it tends to become abusive. That's just the innate way it is. It's just sort of the order of the universe. If you have a more laissez-faire, more liberal system after the initial fashion, you tend not to get that. It's very difficult to abuse people because there's no power structure to abuse them. Or if there is, it's counterbalanced against others. This is the idea behind constitutions and separation of powers and things of that nature. Now, of course, it doesn't work perfectly. You look at our system, there's plenty of abuse to go around, but under communism and socialism, it's way worse. You look at the widespread systemic poverty in these three states, as opposed to some of their neighbors, like Colombia's beginning to develop now. It's becoming better, especially now that they've gotten some of their guerrilla movements, their rebels, to sort of calm down, lay down their arms, and they're like, look, we're ruining our own country here, we got bigger problems. Brazil now, under Bolsonaro, is going to, I believe, explode with growth. And by the way, years ago, I think when they kicked Dilma out, or I think it was, I said the best thing that they could do is become a libertarian nation, because Brazil could become an economic power of significance if it did so. And that appears to be what they're aiming to do. Bolsonaro is vaguely libertarian in some ways. He's like, well, I'll give you your guns back, basically. Get rid of some of that shit. I think that it's a good movement for this hemisphere. We should be the hemisphere of progress. It's like a lot of people in the United States, they look to Europe and they're like, whoa, Europe this, Europe that. And it doesn't even matter whether they're on the left or the right. Like the hyper liberals, they say oh, Europeans are so much better. They don't need their guns and they drink their soy and stuff. And then people on the far right, they're like, oh, well, they shed a tear for Mother Europa or something like that. I'm like, fuck that shit. There's no reason to. We should be the hemisphere that leads the world. Yeah, I do believe that. I think it's wonderful. Unfortunately, we've had a series of shitty leaders who primarily believe the way to do that is to bomb people. I think that there are better ways to do it. Diplomatic isolation will work better anyway. If we were to intervene directly like in Venezuela, what we would be facing is a civil war situation that would spiral out of control, bleed over into other countries, and cause mass chaos. It would also give a cheap diplomatic shot, an arrow in the quiver to the Russians and the Chinese to say, look, those evil imperialists over there are doing it again. Yeah, and it wouldn't be entirely a baseless claim either. And if Trump were to do something like that, I would definitely oppose it. That would be another no-go zone. Like if Trump were to say, okay, we're going into Venezuela, we're going to have a war here. So don't worry, it'll be a quick war. It'll be not huge or something. I would no longer be able to support him. I would move into the disapproves of presidency category at that point. But sanctioning Venezuela to put pressure on Maduro, no, I don't have a problem with that. There's pressure there anyway. They were already collapsing. What the fuck do a few U.S. sanctions really make a difference on? then Russia and China have to expend their manpower, you know, basically occupying. Like, I think China has some troops in Nicaragua, if I remember correctly. I think because they tried to build that shitty canal that I said was doomed years ago, and lo and behold has been basically stalled out since then. Who could have seen that one coming? Oh, the Chinese just wanted to build a base and a couple of resorts and stuff. Yeah, see, now they have a toehold in the Americas, which is exactly what they wanted. I warned of that years ago too, but you know, nobody paid me any heed. They thought that they would actually build this shitty canal. I remember all the China apologists, like the socialist types, that they're like, oh, Mao was such a great guy, and you know, stupid shit like that. At the time, they were like, no, they will build it, and it will replace the Panama Canal. China will be the new world power, haha. No, what they wanted is a base to be able to listen in on what we were doing in that region, really. That's basically what it amounts to. They wanted a base near the Panama Canal. They don't want to replace it. There will never be a Nicaragua Canal. It's never going to get finished. Local support for it dwindled when they realized, hey, it's going to flood a bunch of farms, destroy some rainforest. It's not really going to benefit our economy, and these Chinese are coming in with a lot of guns. We're getting a little bit worried. That's essentially what happened. And their politicians there, they wanted some communist soldiers around to protect them if the people ever revolted, maybe, or something like that. So yeah, I think I absolutely support this. Socialism is a total cancer. We need to excise it from the hemisphere. That's about all. Peace out.